It was supposed to be routine. A short 90-minute flight. Clear skies. No storms. Nothing unusual. But Marcus Lane never made it to his destination. At 42 years old, Marcus was no rookie. He wasn't the kind of pilot who got careless. He was a former U.S. Air Force officer with over 2,000 hours in the sky. Quiet, measured, and precise. He'd flown combat missions in Iraq, survived harsh conditions, and handled more pressure than most men ever would. When he retired from the military, he didn't stop flying. He just chose different skies. On the evening of July 12, 2019, he prepared for another familiar trip, a solo flight from Little Rock, Arkansas to Tulsa, Oklahoma. It was a path he knew well. In fact, he'd taken that exact route more than a dozen times in the past year alone. He was flying a Piper PA-28 Cherokee, a small, single-engine plane known for its reliability. Weather reports were clear. Visibility was high. No mechanical issues during pre-flight checks. Everything was perfect. At exactly 6:02 p.m., Marcus radioed Little Rock Air Traffic Control. His voice was calm, focused, bored even. Smooth air. No issues, he said. It was the kind of report every controller likes to hear, a check-in so normal you barely remember it. But that would be the last time anyone ever heard from Marcus Lane. 18 minutes later, without any warning or distress signal, Flight 204 vanished from radar. One moment, the Piper Cherokee was cruising steadily through open sky. The next, it was gone. No mayday call. No emergency beacon. Just silence. At first, no one panicked. Glitches happen. Planes dip under radar for a moment, only to pop back up minutes later. But Marcus's plane never did. Air traffic control attempted contact. Nothing. They reached out to nearby aircraft. Still nothing. By 7 p.m., concern was growing. A full alert was issued by 7:30. The FAA launched a search. They plotted Marcus's last known position. It showed a steady flight path, until the moment he simply disappeared. The assumption. Mechanical failure. A sudden engine malfunction. Maybe even a bird strike. That's how most disappearances start, with logical guesses. But within hours, the pieces stopped fitting. Flight 204 had no known maintenance issues. Marcus had passed his most recent physical. The Piper was equipped with an emergency locator transmitter, a beacon that automatically sends a signal upon impact. But no signal had been received. And that wasn't just strange. It was nearly impossible. By the next morning, rescue teams were combing the last known area, a 30-mile stretch between central Arkansas and the edge of the Ozark National Forest. But there was nothing. No smoke. No metal. No broken tree limbs. Just quiet, endless woods and sky. For Marcus's family, the waiting was unbearable. His younger sister, Dana, later recalled. He texted me before takeoff, said he'd be in Tulsa before dark. We were supposed to have dinner. When he didn't show, I just thought maybe he got delayed. But then, I felt it. Something wasn't right. Friends were confused. Marcus was meticulous. He wasn't reckless. He didn't take risks, not even small ones. So if something had gone wrong, what was it? As the search widened, investigators reviewed his past flight logs. And that's when they noticed something unusual. Marcus hadn't flown a straight line to Tulsa. Instead, about 15 minutes into the flight, his aircraft began drifting, slightly at first but then with clear intent, toward the dense, isolated stretch of wilderness in the Ozark Mountains. A place with no nearby airports. No towns. No reason to fly over unless you were lost, or had made a choice. But Marcus wasn't lost. His instruments were working. The weather was clear. He wasn't disoriented. So why did he leave his route? Why did he fly toward the middle of nowhere? By day 2, the FAA publicly acknowledged the mystery. They still called it a possible crash, but behind closed doors questions were piling up. A decorated pilot disappears midair, no signal, no trace, and changes direction without explanation? Something didn't make sense. News coverage remained light. A small-town pilot, a small plane. No headline drama. But within the aviation community, whispers began to circulate. Could Marcus have staged his disappearance? Had he intentionally gone off-grid? Those who knew him said absolutely not. He wasn't running from anything, one colleague said. He was solid. If anything, he was the guy you'd call when things went wrong. And so, for 3 days, the forest remained silent. No sign of Marcus. No wreckage. No answers. But that would soon change. Because on day 5, someone saw smoke. For 5 days, the Arkansas wilderness held its breath. Search teams worked around the clock, combing the thick trees and hills of the Ozark National Forest. Helicopters swept the sky. Drones scanned the terrain. Ground crews hiked into the brush, calling out Marcus Lane's name. But there was no signal. No wreckage. No Marcus. It was like the sky had simply swallowed him. The FAA had now shifted from rescue to recovery. Still, even in their silence, hope flickered. People wanted to believe he might be out there, alive, injured, waiting for help. But deep down everyone knew. Planes don't just disappear. On the morning of day 5 the tone changed. A call came in from a hiker, a man named Lucas Fenn who had been camping alone in a remote part of the forest, more than 20 miles from any major road. He'd seen something strange. There was smoke, he said. Not much but enough. I thought maybe it was another camper, but it smelled off. More chemical. Not wood. He gave his coordinates. Search and rescue teams moved fast. Within 3 hours they found it. Tucked between 2 tall pine trees, barely visible from above, was the Piper Cherokee. Or what remained of it. The plane wasn't in pieces. It wasn't scattered across a hillside. It hadn't slammed into the earth at full speed. It looked almost placed there. The nose had wedged gently between the trees. The wings were damaged but intact. The fuselage had suffered minor burns but not from impact. There was no crater. No debris field. No signs of a crash landing. Just a plane, sitting quietly in the middle of nowhere, like it had landed itself. Inside, Marcus Lane was still strapped into the pilot's seat. His eyes were closed. There was no blood. No visible wounds. No broken bones. And that puzzled everyone. The initial report from the county coroner confirmed it. Marcus had not died from trauma. In fact, he hadn't died from the crash at all. He had died from carbon monoxide poisoning. The cause? Still unknown. Even more disturbing, the aircraft's emergency beacon had been manually disabled. Not broken. Not damaged. Switched off. Intentionally. Investigators moved quickly to secure the site. They cataloged everything. The instruments, the fuel system, the onboard electronics. Nothing appeared out of place. The plane had fuel. There were no leaks. No signs of mechanical failure that could explain a carbon monoxide leak. And then they found his flight bag. It was wedged beneath the seat. The outer lining was scorched, but the inside was dry. Untouched. Inside was a wallet. His military ID. A flashlight. A few routine maintenance forms. And one folded sheet of paper. Handwritten. 8 words. I know they're watching me from the sky. No greeting. No signature. No explanation. Just that. What did it mean? Who was they? Why did Marcus veer off course? And why had he disabled his own emergency signal? The questions piled up fast. Authorities ruled out foul play. There were no signs of a struggle. No forced damage. The door to the cockpit was closed. The locks were intact. But as investigators went deeper, people from Marcus's life began to speak up. His friend and former co-pilot Joel gave a chilling interview. He started getting weird about 2 weeks before the flight. Said he couldn't sleep. That something was bothering him. I thought maybe it was just stress. But then he said something that stuck with me. Joel paused. He said, "Something's wrong up there. I see things when I fly." Joel didn't press him for details. Marcus wasn't the type to elaborate. He held things close. But now that one sentence echoed louder than ever. Investigators reviewed the flight data from his previous journeys. They found nothing unusual. But there was one curious pattern. In the 3 months leading up to the disappearance, Marcus had filed unusually late flight plans. He'd shifted departure times by hours, sometimes without explanation. His routes became slightly irregular, with sudden detours over sparsely populated areas. None of it was extreme. But it painted a picture of a man, avoiding something. Or someone. Could he have been hallucinating? Had stress or PTSD from his military service caught up with him? His family didn't think so. He was calm. Sure. Always in control, his sister Dana said. If he was scared, it wasn't in his head. She believed him. That he saw something up there. That maybe someone really was watching. As the wreckage was cleared and the investigation continued, the final mystery remained unsolved. Marcus Lane flew into clear skies and never came back. And in his final moments, he left behind one sentence. A warning. A secret. A truth he didn't have time to explain. I know they're watching me from the sky. The wreckage was gone. The investigation site cleared. But the forest? The forest remembered. Locals near the Ozark National Forest began whispering. They always had, but now their stories seemed heavier, charged. Some had never even heard of Marcus Lane before his plane was found. But suddenly old memories began bubbling to the surface. Strange lights in the sky, humming sounds at night, animals acting off. These weren't new claims. For decades, hikers had reported unusual things deep in those woods. Lights that weren't stars, vibrations in the ground, feelings of being watched. And for years, people had dismissed it as folklore, small town myth. But after Marcus, the stories felt different. A retired park ranger named Willis Granger stepped forward. He had worked in those woods for 22 years. Never sought attention. Never gave interviews. Until now. There's something in there, he said quietly. Something that don't want to be found. He recounted an experience from 2004. A solo patrol deep in the forest. Late afternoon. He'd stopped to rest when the forest suddenly went dead silent. No birds. No bugs. Nothing. And then this pulse like a vibration rolled through the trees. Made my chest feel heavy. I looked up and saw this shimmer. Like heat waves in the air, but it was cold. He never saw it again. But he never forgot it. When asked why he was speaking now, he answered simply. Because Marcus wasn't crazy. Meanwhile, Marcus Lane's family continued pressing for answers. His sister, Dana, began posting online, asking if anyone had noticed anything unusual on July 12, 2019, the night of his disappearance. The responses trickled in. A man in Fort Smith claimed he'd seen a bright flash in the sky that evening, followed by total silence. He assumed it was lightning, but there were no storms in the area. Another woman, camping with her daughter near a lake on the forest's edge, said they were woken up that night by a loud, low-frequency hum that made their tent vibrate. Her daughter had a nosebleed. She reported it, but no one followed up. And then there was the pilot. Colton Rains, a commercial flyer, had taken off from Memphis that same evening. At 6:24 p.m., just 4 minutes after Marcus's last radio call, Rains was flying over north-central Arkansas when his instruments briefly glitched. It was like my compass spun out, he said. Only for maybe 15 seconds. But it was enough to throw my heading off. Air traffic control dismissed it. Glitches happen. But when Rains learned where Marcus had gone down, he felt a chill. I was in that same airspace. And for a moment I felt watched. He'd never told anyone that before. What if Marcus hadn't been hallucinating? What if he had seen something in the sky that night? Not a plane. Not a storm. Something else. Something that made him change course. Turn off his beacon. And leave behind a cryptic warning. I know they're watching me from the sky. Investigators were stuck. There was no technical reason for the crash. No malfunction they could prove. No known cause of carbon monoxide poisoning in a plane that had passed every inspection. And no proof of foul play. But one thing became clear. Marcus Lane had veered off intentionally. He wasn't lost. He was hiding. What? That's the question no one could answer. Even in his final moments, he had been composed. The cockpit showed no signs of panic. No attempt to land in a clearing. No last-minute shift. It was as if he accepted where he was going. Or worse, he had no choice. His note remained the only clue. 8 words. No context. No clarity. A mystery sealed in flame and smoke. One analyst, a former aviation psychologist, reviewed Marcus's file. She noted no signs of delusion, PTSD, or breakdown. If anything, Marcus was more grounded than most pilots. His background shows a man of focus and discipline. This wasn't a psychotic break. He was rational. Alert. Whatever led to that note, it was real to him. Still, the official report leaned toward pilot error and possible hallucination caused by a carbon monoxide leak. But even that had holes. Carbon monoxide levels in the wreckage didn't match what would typically lead to hallucinations before death. It looked more like containment, exposure. Someone, or something, wanted Marcus quiet. The forest had given up his body, but not his secret. Whatever Marcus Lane saw that day, it died with him. Or maybe it didn't. Maybe it's still up there watching, waiting. Marcus Lane's death had been ruled accidental, but the details didn't sit right with everyone. Not with his family. Not with his colleagues. And especially not with a quiet circle of former pilots who had flown similar routes and noticed similar things. One of them was retired commercial pilot David Kessler, now living in Missouri, not far from the Ozark Range. He reached out to Dana Lane, Marcus's sister, after reading her post online. "I never knew your brother," he said, "but I know what he saw." Dana didn't reply at first. Too many internet strangers had reached out, most sounding like conspiracy theorists, attention seekers, or outright trolls. But something about Kessler's message felt calm, measured, like a man not chasing headlines, but running from a truth too heavy to carry alone. They arranged a call. He didn't sound crazy. He sounded tired, like someone who had been quiet for too long. Kessler told her about a flight back in 2014. Routine cargo run. Flying at 10,000 feet above northern Arkansas when he noticed a second blip on his radar, tailing him at a steady distance. At first I thought it was a reflection, maybe another aircraft flying below altitude. But there was nothing visual. No plane. No lights. Just this shadow on the screen. He contacted air traffic control. They confirmed there were no other aircraft within 30 miles. I started getting this feeling in my chest. Like pressure. Not fear exactly, but something ancient. Like being hunted. And then, as suddenly as it appeared, the blip was gone. The next morning, his onboard logs had been wiped. Not corrupted. Not malfunctioned. Erased. When he filed a maintenance report, the airline replaced his radar unit. No one asked further questions. He never spoke of it again, until Marcus's story resurfaced. Your brother wasn't hallucinating, he told Dana. He was being followed. Kessler wasn't the only one. A former FAA technician who requested to stay anonymous also stepped forward. Sometimes we'd get radar hits in that airspace that didn't behave like planes. No transponder. No call sign. Just movement, smooth, silent, wrong. Then gone. He claimed the incidents were internally dubbed phantom signatures, radar ghosts. And they weren't logged. They were buried. It wasn't our job to ask questions. Only to keep traffic moving. The deeper Dana dug, the more resistance she met. Files sealed. Emails unanswered. Calls dropped mid-sentence. But then she got a call from a man who wouldn't give his full name, just Tom. He claimed to have served with Marcus during his time in the Air Force. We flew reconnaissance missions together. Low-altitude stuff. He saw things back then too, just never talked about it publicly. Dana pressed him for more. All I can say is this, there are things in our skies that don't belong to us. We've seen them. Tracked them. Been told to ignore them. Marcus wasn't just a great pilot. He was a curious one. That's what got him killed. Meanwhile, back at the crash site, nature was taking the forest back. The plane had been removed, but something about the area felt wrong. Local hikers began avoiding that stretch of trail. One man reported that his compass spun wildly anytime he neared the site. Another claimed his phone refused to take pictures. Every photo snapped came out black, even in broad daylight. And one woman, who ventured close out of curiosity, swore she heard a radio transmission, faint and garbled, playing from nowhere. It sounded like a man, she said, repeating a sentence, over and over. I only caught a few words, something about watching, sky, not alone. Then it cut. The FAA refused to comment. But Marcus's case, once an overlooked file, had now caught the attention of independent investigators and underground researchers. One of them, a data analyst named Cynthia Arroyo, released a report compiling over 12 unexplained aviation incidents in the same air corridor between 2003 and 2020. They all shared one thing. Sudden loss of radar signal. No distress call. Inconsistent wreckage patterns. And always radio silence in the final moments. Her conclusion? There's a blind spot in our skies. Not geographical, intentional. Marcus's name now sits at the top of that list. A name tied to 8 chilling words. I know they're watching me from the sky. What did he see? Was it a craft? A presence? A warning? Or was it all part of a pattern long ignored? We may never know. But something chased Marcus Lane. Something silenced his beacon. And something made sure his final words would raise more questions than answers. By now, the death of Marcus Lane had evolved from a tragic accident to something far stranger, and far more disturbing. His mysterious note, sightings of radar phantoms, and the eerie, untouched crash site in the Ozarks had started to draw in more than just family and former colleagues. Now, the underground was watching. Independent researchers, aviation theorists, and even one former Air Force intelligence officer, who would only speak under strict anonymity. Let's call him Redbird. Dana Lane received an unmarked package at her doorstep 2 weeks after her phone call with Tom, Marcus's old comrade. Inside the envelope was a USB drive, a pair of worn aviation gloves, and a typed message that simply read, he was right. The whisper files were never supposed to surface. There was no return address. No fingerprints. Against her better judgment, Dana plugged the USB into a secure offline laptop. The files inside weren't ordinary. They were clipped voice memos, distorted cockpit recordings, and timestamped flight logs, all marked Classified Project Whisper. But these weren't official government documents. They looked leaked, disorganized, raw, real. In one of the recordings, a voice eerily similar to Marcus's said, "Second object detected at 9 o'clock, no visual contact. It's moving too fast. This isn't turbulence. This is something else." The audio ends with heavy breathing and then a sharp static cut, as if something interrupted the transmission. The next file was a digital scan of a handwritten note. "They don't blink. They don't turn. They follow. And the sky isn't empty." Dana sat frozen. She forwarded the contents to Cynthia Arroyo, the data analyst who had compiled similar aviation incidents in the region. Cynthia confirmed it. Some of the digital signatures in the logs matched archived data from Marcus's final flight. That meant one thing. These files weren't just similar. They were connected. Soon after the leak, Cynthia's website was taken down. Her backup cloud drive, wiped clean. When she called Dana, she sounded shaken. "I backed everything up 3 ways, Dana. This wasn't a hack. This was deliberate. Someone doesn't want these logs out." Back in Little Rock, another shock rippled through the investigation. A forest ranger, doing a routine patrol of the Ozark area near the crash site, stumbled across a small metal fragment buried under a patch of moss and dirt. It didn't match any part of Marcus's Piper Cherokee. It was smooth, black, and curved like a claw. No serial number. No rust. And no explanation. He handed it to local authorities. By the next morning, the fragment had disappeared. The ranger was told not to ask questions. But he quietly took a picture before handing it over, and sent that image to a local journalist. That image eventually made its way to Dana. She posted it anonymously on a private forum dedicated to aerospace anomalies. Within 24 hours, she received a direct message from someone calling themselves Lima Echo. "That's not from any aircraft on Earth. You need to stop posting. They're watching you now too." Later that week, Dana began noticing subtle shifts in her routine. Her car alarm would go off in the middle of the night. Her home Wi-Fi would drop, only when she tried to access Marcus's files. And one night, a drone hovered silently outside her apartment window for nearly 4 minutes, then vanished. She wasn't the only one being watched. Kessler, the retired pilot, reported similar experiences. Cameras in his home blinked off and on randomly. His laptop's hard drive suddenly encrypted itself. "This isn't paranoia," he told her. "It's protocol. Quiet intimidation. I've seen it before." Still, Dana refused to back down. She reached out to aviation safety investigator Milo James, a retired NTSB veteran who now consulted on strange, unresolved crashes. Milo had heard of Marcus Lane. In fact, he'd wanted to investigate the crash himself, but had been denied access. "I was told the file was closed. Final report marked inconclusive mechanical failure, but I've seen that label too many times." It's their version of a shrug. When Dana showed him the Whisper files, his response was immediate. "I've seen this exact flight path glitch before, in 3 other crashes. All solo flights. All disappeared from radar in clear conditions. It's not equipment failure. It's electronic interference. Something we can't explain, or won't." Then Milo asked a question Dana hadn't expected. "Did your brother ever mention seeing lights, without a source?" Dana paused, then remembered. A week before his final flight, Marcus left her a voicemail. At the time, she thought it was just small talk. Now she replayed it and heard what she had missed before. "Saw something odd tonight on the way in. Bright lights, but they weren't stars. They moved like they were watching." Now the connections were undeniable. The radar phantoms. The erased logs. The silent object above his plane. The final note in his flight bag. "I know they're watching me from the sky." Marcus Lane had seen something. And the more Dana pulled at the threads, the more she felt it too, that weight in the air. Not fear. Not imagination. Just a cold certainty. Marcus hadn't died by accident. He died with knowledge. Knowledge someone was trying very hard to bury. And yet, he left behind clues. One final clue, to be exact, hidden in the most unexpected place. Marcus Lane left behind more than a note. More than a voice. He left a trail, scattered, buried, barely there. And in the final days of her search, Dana Lane found the last piece of that trail, hidden where no one had thought to look. His old aviator watch. It had been recovered from the crash, scorched but intact, and placed in a sealed evidence bag, forgotten in a storage room at the coroner's office. When Dana finally obtained it, she didn't think much of it. The watch wasn't ticking. The screen was cracked. Just another reminder of what was lost. But Milo James, the retired investigator helping Dana, looked closer. And then he noticed it. The backplate of the watch had been pried open. Not removed. Just lifted, like someone had hidden something inside. They carefully pulled it apart. Tucked inside the casing was a tiny microSD card. It contained a single audio file. Date stamped just 3 hours before Marcus's final flight. In his own voice, steady but tight with tension, Marcus spoke. "If you're hearing this, it means I didn't make it. Something's out there. Not weather. Not turbulence. I've seen it 3 times now, same spot, same light. It doesn't fly. It floats. I think they've been watching me. And I think I got too close. If anyone finds this, I need you to know, they don't want the truth coming down with me." The message ended with static. And then, nothing. The final report from the FAA never mentioned the recording. In fact, the official ruling remained unexplained mechanical failure compounded by possible pilot error. That's how Marcus Lane's story was meant to end. But thanks to Dana, and a few brave voices who refused to be silent, the world knows a different version now. A version with questions that linger. Why did Marcus turn off his emergency beacon? What exactly did he see at 5,000 feet above the Ozarks? And who, or what, was watching him from the sky? We may never have answers. But maybe, that's the point. Because some truths don't land in plain sight. Some stay suspended in the clouds, drifting just out of reach, like whispers in the wind. And maybe Marcus Lane didn't just vanish. Maybe he was silenced. Or maybe he was chosen. Thank you for watching. If this story gripped you like it gripped us, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. We post chilling, emotional, and deeply mysterious stories every week. Drop a comment below. What do you think Marcus saw that day? Was it something real? Or something we're not ready to understand? Either way, this was Behind the Crime. And we'll see you in the next one.